Welcome back to Rating the List, where we review, discuss, and reimagine popular movie lists objectively. We're your hosts. I'm Jerry.
And I'm Brad. And on this episode, we'll be exploring number 10 from Sports Illustrated's 50 Greatest Sports Movies of All Time.
All right, and number 10 is When We Were Kings, released in 1996, directed by Leon Gast, starring Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, and Don King.
A retrospective of the Rumble in the Jungle, the 1974 heavyweight championship fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman.
All right. So, documentary. What I did like about this documentary, it really showcased the personalities of the boxers.
I think it did a better job of doing that with Muhammad Ali than with George Foreman.
It felt very one-sided.
And I think the official name of the movie is actually Muhammad Ali, When We Were Kings. So I think it's kind of pointed that way, but I think it would have been a more effective film when you're talking about the overall fight to talk about with some balance. I mean, it's pretty hard to balance out a personality as strong as Muhammad Ali. I mean, the guy is an iconoclast, so. And George Foreman, I mean, there's like an entire generation that only knows George Foreman from, greaseless grills and whatnot and infomercials. So, you see him on those and he's fairly charismatic and outspoken.
Oh, yeah.
Back when he was boxing, that wasn't so much the case. So it was kind of this, kind of opposites kind of thing going on. So you can kind of understand it from one end, but, George Foreman was alive in 1996. You could have interviewed him when this movie came out.
That's very true.
There's no interview with him. I don't know. It's possible maybe they tried.
They had the cameramen themselves were not interviewing him.
Right.
Like the Muhammad Ali got interviewed by the filmmakers.
Well, the Muhammad Ali's all of his footage is from 1974. I'm talking about the behind the scenes interviews that are kind of more.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't do that with Muhammad Ali. He was suffering from Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
So it was a little, he was still there mentally, but, trying to do an interview with him at that time would have been a little more difficult, I think, for the filmmakers. But they had so much footage of him from back then to go on. And then they also had, like, a lot of the people that were in his corner and were there, and there's a lot of background. There just wasn't enough George Foreman to go around, which I think is a detriment. Like I said, I think it's a detriment to the film overall because you've got the two guys that are fighting and you really only hear a lot about the one. And even when you hear about George Foreman, it's kind of through the eyes of the people who were in Muhammad Ali's corner.
Yes, that's true.
And not the people that were in Foreman's corner. It's like, why didn't you interview those people? I mean, they just...
Yeah.
I mean, every documentary kind of has its, angle. And I guess theirs was more towards the Muhammad Ali side.
I mean, they should really have called it When I Was a King. Because really, I mean, it was very one-sided. I kind of wish I could have gotten a little bit more about the festival itself. Mm-hmm. They did show, like, artists who participated, like James Brown and a couple of other known bands at the time. That would have been kind of cool, but they did show some clips of what that concert that was happening at the same time as the boxing.
I did like how they settled in on discussing the place, like understanding, we're kind of at the tail end of the civil rights movement, but this was in Africa versus in America, and even like someone like Muhammad Ali, who has an American black experience, going overseas and seeing what the African black experience was. That was kind of enlightening and interesting to hear him talk about that.
Yeah.
Again, it would have been nice to hear George Foreman's thoughts on that. I'm sure he had some. Overall, it's a really well-made film. It won the Academy Award.
Yeah, for best
for
documentary.
best long form documentary in 1996.
It also, like, you know, I don't feel like the heyday of boxing is right now. I feel like boxing's heyday was like at this time of Muhammad Ali and his generation. Right now, I feel like we put the same effort into
UFC.
watching UFC or the MMA. That's like
Yeah.
America's thing right now.
I think it's more the world's thing too. I just don't think that boxing has the kind of cachet that it used to. Like, even like, I remember, like, you know, remember back like in the 80s, there were all these like pay-per-view events and like,
HBO had a lot of the boxing events.
Showtime did. They had like nights where that's all they did was have boxing on. I'm not sure that it happens anymore.
I don't think so.
I don't think HBO does it at all. Maybe Showtime does, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just clearly not as popular. It's kind of waned in popularity. It kind of peaks up. Like, I bet you there'll be a little bit of an upsurge with the Olympics, because boxing in the Olympics is always kind of a fairly popular sport, because it's usually the like the lower weights where you see a lot of the skill of boxing, the way that they score it. So you kind of get to see the, you know, quote unquote sweet science that they always talk about. But again, like, you know, just times have changed. There's, you know, there's a more dynamic kind of, you know, gladiatorial thing going on now. With mixed martial art fighting.
We like that as human beings. We're like into the gladiator thing.
Football.
Like, the Romans were on to something.
Well, I mean, it was about giving them, the masses something, so they didn't think about stuff. But that's a whole other subject.
Yeah, that's the whole.
I think my sister actually wrote a paper on that way back when.
So, like, so the basis of this documentary is Muhammad Ali challenges George Foreman to a fight.
Yeah, and he had given up the title because he was a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War. So he had to give up his title, and he had been out of the ring for a bit. And, you know, honestly, this was kind of like he was at the back end of his career, and George Foreman was kind of the guy. He was kind of like the Mike Tyson of his era, where he was just pummeling guys. I mean, he was just like knocking guys out left and right, and people just could not keep up with him. They just didn't have the stamina to do it. And, you know, Muhammad Ali, being probably the greatest boxer of all time, figures out a way to beat him at a time when no one really thought that he could.
Yeah.
Which was pretty interesting.
Well, I mean, he took a good game. He like pumped him. He was like his own cheerleader.
That was his game.
Yeah.
He had the gift of gab, you know, in a sport where, you know, these guys talk a lot of trash. He was probably the best ever.
Yeah, he was a good trash talker, and it really is showcased in this movie. Like, he's like doing that. Every other word is like a trash talk to somebody.
Yeah.
He's trash talking some. What's his Howard Cosell?
Oh, they had a whole thing there that, like, you know, there was a time when, like, well, Howard was kind of a little bit disrespectful for him when he changed his name from, you know, he was born Cassius Clay, and he changed his name to Muhammad Ali, and Howard kept calling him Cassius Clay, and, you know, that's a little disrespectful.
Yeah, that's rude.
So they always had a little thing going on, and it's showcased a little bit in this one.
Yeah, it's really funny. I don't feel like I was super engaged in the documentary. I feel like I couldn't tell you honestly, like, between you and I, like, I couldn't tell you who won it.
Muhammad Ali won it.
Okay, yeah. See, I don't.
That was kind of the whole point of it.
I know, but I wasn't engaged in it. It really did not grab me.
I mean, this is one thing. We'll talk more about this when we get to the end of the list, but there's a lot of boxing movies on this.
And they're so depressing.
And it's not just that. There's not, like, every boxing movie is kind of, you know, man against self
Mm-hmm.
or man against man or some combination of those two.
Yeah, it's kind of the same story repeated
It's
over and
kind
over
of,
again.
and even this, like, it's cliche to say, but like even in this documentary, it's kind of, it's mostly man against man and, you know,
Yeah.
man against self a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's always that, and it's just I'm not super drawn to boxing movies. I know some people are. There's an awful lot of them on this list. I think there's like 10.
There's probably about 10. I mean, some of them are really good. Like,
Yeah.
there's a few that I really enjoyed, and then there's some that I'm just like,
I mean, we're at number 10.
We still got-
Spoiler alert, there's a couple more boxing movies
Yeah.
left.
a couple more.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. So yeah, I mean, I can appreciate what this documentary was for, and why it exists, and why it won the best documentary when it did. I get it. But for me, it was just not super engaging for me to watch.
It did the thing I like documentaries to do, which is to give you context of the world in which the documentary is being shot.
Yes.
So we learn a little bit about what America was like in 1974, a little bit about what the world politics were like in 1974. I always enjoy that, especially the farther back you go with the documentary.
Yes.
I mean, this is the year that I was born, so
Yeah.
you know, this is a long time ago. And, you know, seeing it even like in 1996 was 20 years separated from this movie. Now we're 50 years separated from it. So looking back on it, you get a little bit of an idea of what was happening. And that gives a lot of context to what you're seeing in terms of the actual interviews and the people. I wish they had done a little bit more of the retrospective stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's, you had a lot of stuff, you know, shot at the time of you know, of the actual event, which is great. And then they sprinkled in retrospective stuff with, you know, some of the people that were in his corner and things like that. I think it would have worked better if it had a little bit more of that and also a little bit more of the George Foreman element. But that was just kind of a choice they made as filmmakers. Just for me, I would have liked to have seen that.
All right, how do we rank it?
I gave this one a 78, and you gave it a 67. The list score is 72.5.
That's not bad.
Well, I mean, it did win the Academy Awards.
It did.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty good movie.
Yeah. So, let us know what you think. Don't discourage my viewpoint of it. If you were like, you're a boxing fanatic and you haven't seen this, you should really watch it.
I would say also, if you're just a fan of documentaries, this is one.
Yeah, this is a good documentary. So, anyway, if you'd like to leave a comment, please do so on this video. If you'd like to talk to us directly, please do so. Please email us at ratingthelist@gmail.com. But that's it for now. I'm Jerry.
I'm Brad.
And we're Rating the List. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.